On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, we're joined by Richard Stamen at Mavs Draft on Twitter to discuss the Thunder's draft. Is this a good class for Oklahoma City, and what should they do at pick 12?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and SI Thunder beat writer Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. Folks, on today's show, brought to you by LinkedIn, we're joined by at Mavs Draft on Twitter, Richard Stamen, host of Locked On NBA Big Board. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. It helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedInNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedInNBA to get your job for free, and terms and conditions do apply. Richard, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm excited to be back. It's been, I don't know the last time I was here, maybe the 23 draft.
It's been too long. It's been too long, and we love to ramp things up here. It was shocking, right? Because we usually are here weekly with you for the last 2 months, but the Thunder extended their season a little too far, which was a good thing for the Thunder, a bad thing for our crossovers. But glad to have you back in the fold here as much as possible, leading into the draft and recapping the draft. Richard, this 2024 NBA draft class, you've been covering it the entire cycle. You have your Substack, you have Locked On NBA Big Board, you're on Twitter posting up about prospects right up to this minute that we're talking at Mavs Draft on Twitter. It's seen a lot of different narratives and a lot of different opinions, right? Like at the start of the cycle, it was just this awful draft class. Get out while you still can. And now I think as we get closer, naturally, people are warming up to the draft. But what is your overall gut feeling on this draft? Is just an entity?
Yeah, there's a few things. One, the star power is just weak compared to most years. Second, it's a draft that teams need to find the right fit, and vice versa. The players need the right fit to really hit. And I think that's important to remember, where a bad draft means players have to hit at the right fits, right? 2011 is a great example of this. It was seen as a weak draft, but almost every single player probably went to their ideal destination. And lo and behold, it's actually one of the stronger drafts of the last 15 years. So things like that could happen. I don't think it's as likely this year. And then the last thing really is it's the first year where we finally see the COVID effects. This class 4 years ago, a lot of them were either incoming freshmen at college or incoming freshmen in high school. So their whole development trajectory is vastly different than anything we've seen over the last, really our lifetime in that regard. It's just completely different. So keep that in mind. It might fool some people, myself included.
So I think that that's a good overview of this draft. And a lot of those branches we're going to, jump off of as we dig into this conversation. But now putting on your Thunder hat, I think that this is a good draft for Oklahoma City. How would you rate this draft for the Thunder specifically?
Yeah, the Thunder have the one pick, right? It's just number 12, I think.
Yep.
It's a weird spot to be picking. I wouldn't be surprised if they trade back. There's opportunities to fill the needs, right? Get another big who can play next to Chet. I think that's possible at 12. I really do think that Zach Edey might actually be in play. From what I've heard, it's pretty real that stuff is happening, that he's lottery bound. So we'll see.
So let's just go right to Zach Edey, because what you just said is going to perk up the ears of the entire Thunder fan base, and we'll get back on track. When you look at Zach Edey, and just to clarify, it's been real that he's a lottery prospect, or it's been real that there's smoke between him and the Thunder?
No, lottery prospect. I didn't hear anything team specific. This is from the combine people I talked to. I was asking is the Edey stuff real? And every single one of them told me yeah, that's not coming out of nowhere. They're genuinely our team's interested at that lottery range, back in the lottery. So probably the Thunder are implied in that.
Right. But not explicitly, which is why we wanted to clear that up, because you know how people are going to take that. Right.
Yeah.
But if it is the Thunder, what does Zach Edey bring to the table? Because I think that there's just two distinct aisles that people are on. Either you don't think Zach Edey can play at all in the NBA, and he is this, Boban light, or the strengthened version of Boban, or you believe that he is the magic elixir to the Thunder's problems. And I think that oftentimes the truth is like in the middle of those two things. But just from your observation, you've been tracking this guy through multiple draft cycles, through his entire lineage of high school to college. Like, what is Zach Edey, and what makes him capable of being a lottery talent?
Yeah, he's a giant with skill. I mean, let me just read some of the names that have done what he did this year. Like, I don't know how into advanced stats you are personally, Rylan, but players who had a 15 or higher box plus minus, and by the way, Edey did that. There are a handful of players. It's Zach Edey this year, Zion Williamson in his freshman year in 2019, Brandon Clark in his draft year, Sindarius Thornwell, who didn't end up translating but was a fantastic college player that led South Carolina to the Final Four, Frank Kaminsky, kind of the same thing, and then Anthony Davis and Steph Curry. So that list is really promising when you're that good in college. There's a reason why you're being mocked as a lottery pick, is saying, okay, well, it's a whole different game. Edey has skill to shoot. I think he's a lot more mobile than somebody really, outside of Wemby, how many 7'4" guys are that mobile? And to me, that's kind of what it is, right? Where he's just this giant. He has a bunch of skill to soft touch near the paint. Not necessarily great touch, but it is soft touch. Jump shot potential, the free throw percentage on extremely high volume at 74 at his size is really good. He wasn't asked to ever shoot jumpers because why would you? And the next tallest player is maybe 7 foot in college. And that's kind of pushing it. But the concerns that I think a lot of people have are, okay, he can be easily played off as an isolation, like against ISOs. He's easily shaken off his body. Hesitation moves really move him off his spot hard. Like he's bouncing back and then has to recover. That throws him off. Absolutely. The thing is, though, in the NBA, they usually have a second line of defense. Now, obviously, when Edey's out, that takes it away a little bit. But you have to game plan entirely differently. Like, that's the big thing, is if you have Shea, who is a killer getting to the rim and honestly getting anywhere within the three-point line, or really anywhere on the floor, you have that plus a guy who you cannot leave alone. That makes everybody else better on the floor.
So with Zach Edey, I do have questions about his NBA mobility. I think it's better than what people assume, but I don't know if it's good enough at the NBA level. I do have questions about, if he can be the same score at the NBA level as he was at the college level. But, you've done a really good job of explaining how he could work out. When you're looking at Zach Edey, you were one of the few people that we were not having to convince that Chet could play center. Like, we were on board with Chet being a center. What does that look like if Zach Edey and Chet Holmgren are on the same team?
Yeah, so I mean, every team is allowed one non-shooter, I think, at most. You obviously can't have two. Some teams, for whatever reason, have tried it. Not going to name names on which teams, but they are in the Western Conference that I've seen this year. But then it doesn't work. The thing is, if Edey is able to, in fact, shoot mid-range jumpers, you really don't actually have a true, like the Mavs, for example, they have non-shooters all the time. Gaffer doesn't shoot mid-range. Lively doesn't shoot mid-range. They're in the finals. It can work with the right infrastructure, and also just having even mid-range changes it a lot. But with Edey, he really absorbs so many of those hits that Chet is currently taking that takes a toll in I think really in the long run. We saw it in the playoffs too. A lot of the physicality made it. I felt like a lot of that, the poor shooting performances came from him just being winded from the amount of physicality. So you reduce a little bit of that, and that's not a knock at his shape or anything. It's just like he can't be doing all of those things. Like, eventually you're human. It's going to take a toll on you. So I think having Edey there to absorb a lot of those hits, and even like another example, at the beginning of the season, Jokic, and it was his first matchup against Chet. He bulldozed him every single box out. It was pushed aside and things like that. And then you have Edey to clean up that allows Chet to play his best game.
So, I think that Zach Edey would be a backup big man in the NBA just in general, especially I think with the Thunder, and it would help them, of course, put a bow on their rotation, because right now your front court rotation is Chet Holmgren and Jay Will, and we are both fine with Jay Will. I like Jay Will a lot. I think that we saw this year that his best moments came whenever he could play the four at the NBA level. Whenever he was next to Chet, he looked a lot better than whenever he was alone out there. So I think that selecting Edey would help even Jay Will get better. And so then you'd have this layer of Chet's in the game. You can play one way. Then you can put Zach Edey in the game with a second unit and give you a new dynamic. Then you can play them together as you need to. Like, for example, that Dallas series, right? There was a moment in that series where all the Thunder had to do to win a game was go get a rebound off of a missed free throw. And their only course of action was to put a two big lineup in there with Chet and J-Will. Neither one of them could get the rebound. You put Zach Edey in there, it may be a different story. It may not be, but you give yourself a better chance at that rebound without question. So the question would be, is 12 in this draft specifically, is that a spot where you are reside to taking a backup big man?
Yeah, that's exactly my knock, because I don't see him as a starter. He may play with some of the starters, like you said. I mean, he might play like 5 to 8 minutes with Chet every night. That's fine, but like, you're giving this guy lottery money for 4 years at least. That's where the idea gets a little bit too rich for me. He's got to be a starter. Like, I get it. Some of these guys, like, their 20 minutes is better than a lot of guys' other 30 minutes, but he would have to be extremely good. And I just don't know how he scales down as easily. He was probably the highest usage rate of any big in college basketball this year. I don't have that number in front of me, but I would be pretty shocked if it wasn't him. I don't know if he can start in the NBA. Like, there's too many risks, and that's my concern of why I wouldn't take him in the lottery. Like, if you're the Thunder, you're trying to get that. Like, you're probably not drafting a starter in the lottery. They're probably the only team that's comfortable not drafting a starter like that in the lottery. But I don't know if you can really give him that much money, because eventually down the road, I do think that might get you in trouble.
Yeah, that would be a trip up for me as well about the Thunder drafting him, because of just the Thunder's philosophy. Now, things can always change. Whenever you're a 57-win team picking the lottery, it is way different than prior years. But one thing that we both know from watching Sam Presti, and he's one of the guys, like, of course, locally we're going to study, but even nationally, you guys study Sam Presti specifically a lot because of his, just prowess of rebounding teams. He's always seemingly looking to get the big, swing, the best value for whatever he's doing, which includes taking shots at like higher upside guys in the draft, regardless of, team infrastructure versus maybe a sure thing. Like, I think that Zach Edey could help this Thunder team. I think that there's other options out there, though, that might help this Thunder team and also might be like way, higher of a ceiling. How much will Sam Presti lean into the sure thing versus lean into trying to get better? As you mentioned, the Thunder are in a position where, and it's a rarity in the NBA lottery, I think Memphis would be here too, of like, they don't need this to be anything more than a contributor. Like, they don't need this pick to be anything more than someone who puts a bow on their rotation, which then swings that pendulum back to Zach Edey. So it's like, we don't really know what OKC will truly do. But at pick 12, like, you do think, for as bad as this draft class is, that there's better value than what Zach Edey could bring. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like if you're taking a big, why not? There's other bigs out there. Like, they eventually could mold themselves into more well-rounded players with higher upside. Deron Holmes, I mean, I know he's not mocked there right now. I'm a huge Deron Holmes fan, so I have him in my top 15. Like, that's not a reach for me. I also think Yves Missi is somebody else. He's that raw, high upside guy. He's only been playing basketball a handful of years. Why not him? Like, I get it. Like you said, it's almost a floor look, but like, he had Deron Holmes, who has both the floor and ceiling.
Yeah,
obviously
totally
not the exact same, but he does the same things at a smaller height.
Correct. Yeah, I love Holmes, and he's gotten that promise allegedly. So we'll see how that factors in. That every promise they link back to OKC. So we'll see how that works itself out. But coming up, let's continue talking about draft prospects and if the Thunder should look to move back, as we talked about a little bit before. But first one's here right now, but our good friends over at LinkedIn. Check out LinkedIn because they're awesome. Why are they awesome? Well, they understand what you're going through as a small business owner. If you're looking to hire for your small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for your role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is looking to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has the vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it their best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you cannot find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all this while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy whenever you have this many qualified candidates at your disposal. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that as a small business owner, you're wearing so many different hats that you cannot possibly take all the time and resources it takes to hire. That's why LinkedIn's going to help you and consistently find ways to make the process easier. They have launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the matching process quicker and easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedInNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedInNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Folks, make your second listen Locked On NBA Big Board with Richard Stamen at Mavs Draft on Twitter. Richard, we talked about Zach Edey. Ultimately, to put a bow on that, what do you think he could give OKC, just as the Thunder specifically, and do you think that he should be looked at as a realistic option at 12?
Yeah, I don't. I'm torn. I think yes, he could be at 12, but again, it's just like this is the draft as a whole. There's just so many different guys in this range. Once you get to like the top 10, even really top 8, it starts to be interchangeable, and that's kind of the big picture with this draft. Is you won't find two people with the same top whatever number you want to go to, like, and it's very different. It's not like a jumbled order of the same players. You won't see most of the same players in that same range. So
you mentioned there's other bigs to like help the Thunder, because the big man position is what's going to get most Thunder fans going, because they like really envision this team needing a big. Is that a combination of like guys who you could trade up for, or is it guys you can trade back for? Like, where is the value of the big man in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma City kind of kicks that off. I think it's really the 10 to 20 range. There's a lot of them. I think Deron Holmes could be in play, although I don't know. I think he might fall back in the 20s just because teams will overthink him a little. Yves Missi, like I said, Zach Edey obviously is in that range. There's even some guys that, like, I don't know. They're not – that's probably the big three. Kyle Filipowski's kind of in there. I'm much lower on him, but he's not a center. So I don't actually think that's it, but he's a really good rebounder and could take some of those hits away. Like, he is somebody to absorb that. In theory, Ryan Dunn, I think that's very rich for me. I don't think I could do that, but he is a center on offense and a 1 through 5 on defense. I just don't think, like, I don't know. You guys went through the Roberson experience, and I feel like that eventually ran its course. I don't know. I think that's really it. Those are those three, right? Edey, Missi, and Holmes.
And in a draft that lacks, consistency, consensus, whatever, what do you view the ability to trade up in this draft? We've been talking about this for the last 3 drafts of how far the Thunder could get. They have a mountain of assets. Like, where could this take them?
Well, it's a seller's market, or really it's just all sellers. I don't even know if it's actually a seller's market. It's a buyer's market, I think, is what that makes it, where it's everybody wants to move out or move back. Like, everybody wants to pick next year. They want to punt this till next year. But the problem is no buyer is like, you know what? This is better than something next year. Unless it's like the 30th pick of next year that they'd be giving up. You're not getting a good long-term asset because everybody knows how good the next 2 drafts are. And that's even with the top. Like, you don't even need to know anything else. Like, AJ DeBonsa and Cam Boozer 2 years from now, Ace Bailey, Cooper Flagg, Kamon Maluak, Dylan Harper next year. There's so many more, too, for next year that I think Oklahoma City, like, if there was one buyer is all it takes, right? If, I don't know, say the Knicks, like, this is a long shot. Maybe not the Knicks. That's not a good example. But the Cavs, say they come to you and, like, hey, we'll just give you a few future seconds with the limited that they have to move up, whatever, and our 20th pick, that there's really not that competitive of an offer against that. Like, this is not going to be future first to jump several spots because nobody wants to stay where they are. Maybe Toronto. That was a better one than Cleveland. That was a bad example. But Toronto could do the same, right? Like, maybe a protected first.
So, trading back, the drop-off of prospect, you don't think would be there, but it would also not really net you a ton that makes it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Whenever you're looking at trading up from 12, is there a pipeline there to trade up?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Going the opposite way. Yeah. This is absolutely a draft where if Oklahoma City wanted, like, I don't think they could get up to top 2 or 3. It's a little bit much, but I think if they really wanted to get into like 4, 5, 6, 7, like, they could easily do it. It's not going to be like, I don't even know what's the best future pick. Probably the Clippers. I can probably answer that on my own. I feel like one of those Clippers picks I wouldn't do it personally. But you could do that. You could have next year Miami's pick. You have so many different first-round picks for next year. Philadelphia, you could combine those. Both those are going to be good teams. You might you could throw those two in, and you're probably in the top 5. I think.
Yeah, and like you said, I don't even think that I think that it'd be more valuable to have the chance at whatever Philadelphia and Miami and them
yep,
you kind of level off at versus a guy who you trade up for like a Donovan Clingan. Now, that would be a player that is big enough to be to soothe the fan base who's dying for this big man. What is Donovan Clingan at the next level?
Yeah, Klingan's really good. I have him as my second best big behind Alex Sarr. Clingan, he moves the needle on defense. He makes you so much better. He controls the paint. He did a really good job in college. There's no defensive 3 in the key, so this is something different from Zach Edey. Zach Edey camped the paint. And the fact that he only had 2 and something blocks per game is honestly really disappointing, considering he's the biggest guy and he always stayed in the paint. So this is where Clingan wins. I know people look at the national title game, which I think is kind of an unfair small sample size too. And how many times is he going to get posted up by 7'4" guys in the NBA? It's extremely rare. And the only guy that's going to do that against him that's not Edey in the NBA is Wemby, but he's not going to do it at all the exact same way. And Wemby's great. But to answer the question, what I really liked with Clingan was he controlled the paint without ever camping in the paint. That to me in college is a really hard task to do, and he thrived at that. And on top of that, he's extremely smart, very low turnover rate, good assist rate. He sees the floor. He makes everybody around him better on both ends. He's not ever going to shoot. Don't let the combine shooting numbers fool you, but he doesn't need to. He is that good of a paint controller.
So we've kind of dished on all the bigs. I do want to talk two more bigs, and then we're going to get into some of my favorite targets at 12 and let you tell me how dumb I am in the last segment. But starting off with just De'Ron Holmes, because we both like him a lot. And we've seen that Sam Presti will be willing to, if he likes a player, take him a little prematurely, take him a little early, because you might as well just get your guy, especially when you're sitting on this many assets. You can afford to just take your guy if you really believe in them, which people should believe in De'Ron Holmes. So what do you make of his game and how it translates to the NBA?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had a lot of people be like, well, the shot doesn't look good. He sometimes can take a little bit to get things going. His frame is mediocre. He's only 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan. But he is the most fundamental. He might be the most fundamental player in the entire draft. And that goes a really long way. I mean, there's a top 10 player who was literally nicknamed Mr. Fundamental. So, I feel like that goes such a long way. His motor's really good. He's extremely smart. He thrives on NBA sets like pick and pops, pick and rolls, the horn sets, those kind of things are where his bread and butter are. And that is such a commonly run play that he's going to translate. And also, Dayton was one of the slowest teams in the country. And if you look at his per 100 possessions stats, I'm pulling this up right now. It is insane. For reference, 30 points per 100 possession is pretty good. In his stats, he had 38.8 points per 100 possession. Again, some of these, you need the reference points where 5 assists per 100 isn't actually that great, but the 16 he has for rebounds is really impressive. Same thing for blocks. 4 blocks per 100 is really good. I bet if we were to pull up Edey, his numbers aren't even that far off. So per 100, he's at 46 and 22. Obviously, it's not that close as I thought it would be, but also only 3.9 blocks per 100 compared to Holmes's 3.9 as well. So that says a lot to me, is where you look at, he was on a slow team and he still made things work. He'll translate just fine.
So I really, really like De'Ron Holmes, and we'll see where he goes, because he has this draft promise apparently. But another big that I like that I have not gotten the gauge of what the national consensus is. I know locally there's many that are down on Tyler Smith, but I like Tyler Smith a lot. What do you make of him, and especially this funkiness of trying to project the Ignite to the NBA?
Yeah, he's a good athlete, very good athlete actually. He's about 6'9". He measured a little short. He just seemed to be 6'10", 6'11". That was always a reach, but I think with him, the shot, he's a shooter, tall shooter. But for me, I have concerns about the consistency at the moment. He doesn't get the same release or follow through every single time. That kind of worries me. The bigger concern for me is he's one of the worst defenders in the draft. He's tall, but he is extremely pushable off his spot, and I don't think he knows where to be a lot of the times. That's a terrible combination to have. So he could easily be played off the floor in the playoffs.
So that's a good point. I think that you know how near and dear the G League is to my heart. I think that I might view the G League with rose-colored glasses. Obviously not an option at 12, but if we talk about moving back, then you're looking at a different outlook. That's a really, really good point about trading back, especially for the Thunder. How much does that stuff move you to go back versus like the cost benefit of moving back and not really getting a ton of assets, like you mentioned, versus, hey, we have a ton of assets already stored up. Let's just make sure we get the guy that we want, no matter what, even if it's at 12, even if you get a Bill Simmons, whoa, reaction, like whenever you put that draft card in, who cares? Like you've gotten your guy. And not to sound like a Thunder homer, but like if Sam Presti gets his draft guy more often than not, like he's correct in that assumption and in that avenue. Now we've discussed all the bigs that I think could be in play for the Thunder with only one pick in the draft. Coming up though, I think that like the best course of action for the Thunder might not be a big at all, which might shock some Thunder fans. But first, let's hear right now, but our friends over at eBay Motors. Check out eBay Motors today. eBay Motors is great, and they're going to have you covered with 1 million parts to choose from. It's your number one ride or die. Keep it alive with passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning a championship is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. So no matter if you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to choose from. With your number one ride or die, you'll find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, your guaranteed part to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're going to be burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need to choose from. Check out the eBay Motors to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, only available for U.S. customers. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joining us today is Mavs Draft on Twitter, Richard Stamen. I'm Rylan Stiles. Richard, we've talked about the bigs. This is not going to go over well with some Thunder fans, but guards, I think, are what the Thunder can really capitalize on in this draft. So I have some absolute draft darlings that have a G next to their position, which is not going to be good for the comment section. But leading off, Jared McCain. I am in love with Jared McCain on the court.
How can you not be? How can you not be?
Thank you. And you were very intently watching that Mavericks Thunder series. Like you saw this Thunder team up close and personal. They can really stand to have another guard, another shot creator, another guy on this team of what Jared McCain and other guys provide. But what is your overall view of Jared McCain?
Yeah, I'm going to start this by saying I will not advocate for the Thunder to take a guard. I will simply answer the question. I don't want to get carried away because I do love Jared McCain's game. Now, that being said, I'm just going to keep it general with McCain because I think there's some path for him to eventually be like an Isaiah Joe replacement plus because he does so much more. But for now, they could probably coexist. I think with McCain, one, the Duke fit is extremely awkward. Look at the roster on that team, right? They had Jared McCain, Tyrese Proctor, Jeremy Roach. Even some of the other forwards had the ball in their hands a lot, like Kyle Filipowski. So I think with that, you have to keep it in context. Like he had a lot of strong playmaking flashes, but he never was the full-time point guard. He was the third in line. And it is extremely hard. There were times I think Proctor was out, so he may have gotten some run, but it was really hard for him ever to be a full-time point guard or show those skills. And he's going to have to in the NBA because he's short. He's 6'2", has short arms, but the dude is a lights-out shooter. He's extremely fast. I think that was the most underrated thing when I was watching him. His first step is just ridiculous. I think it's a sneaky first step. I hate that phrase with a burning passion, but like he really does. He'll get you up in the air and he's gone. Like it is very fast in that regard. I think he tries really hard. I think he's extremely smart and he has an elite skill in shooting that sticks. If I'm the Thunder, it's not my ideal pick. If the board falls where you're like, well, anything else is just such a reach and we can't trade back and we have to do something, I don't know. I think what's the problem with taking best player available and going, you know what, like we can figure this out later. We got talent. At worst, it's another trade piece. Because with these, when you have so many draft picks and draft capital, the best thing to do is at least maintain or exceed what that original draft capital could have gotten you in value.
Yeah, and I think Jared McCain is just one of the best players that you can get as a team that still needs scoring help, still needs some table setting help, as you see that he can still develop in that game. I think that he also fits this Thunder team, just like from everything that you hear about him, everything that you see about him, just like what he puts himself out there is like this very comfortable guy in his own skin, great teammate, willing to take part in like the barking, like whatever, like the Thunder's like image of like they're this fun loving tight team where they're barking post game, they're making TikToks, they're on social media, like they would really embrace Jared McCain and vice versa, to where like that is a seamless transition to a locker room that's just AAU like for all accounts. Now, another player that I am just enthralled by, I think that's the right word to use, and I think that like this is a Thundery guy, Devin Carter.
I knew it.
Devin Carter.
I knew it. Hey, I will gladly drive that sales pitch. Look, you want the best defender in the class at the guard, it's most likely him. All defense upside in this class and all defensive players, a top 10 player no matter the fit. He also is growing offensively, has really good point guard skills, needs to get more comfortable going left, but he can kill defenses with screens. Like I just, that combination, the jump shot's growing. Look, the work ethic will get him places he needs to overcome his weaknesses. Don't overthink him.
The work ethic, the physicality, the rebounding from his position. And I think that people might look at him and be like, well, they just drafted Cason Wallace. You can never have too many Cason Wallaces. You can never have too many guys that do this. And I think that he's a little bit more polished on ball. I think that Cason can tap into that. And I think he's better than what he got, to display his rookie year, because, his rookie year, Cason was kind of pigeonholed into this like off-ball world because the Thunder were so good, like you couldn't really give him that leash to develop. Whereas Devin McCain, I like them both. Just combine them together. But as Devin Carter, like I think that he walks in as a more immediate on-ball presence for the Thunder. That would do and pay them dividends. I think that 12 is a good spot for both McCain and Carter.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's, especially Carter. I mean, I have him as a top 10 player. At some point, like the draft is about value, not always necessarily what's coming right away. And I don't know, like no player plays 82 games in the year. Doesn't hurt to get insurance like that while maintaining that value, so that like if they are good when they play, you're still holding it. Like one prime example is Jarris Walker. When he played this year, he was still pretty good. They just didn't need him.
And I think that when you're looking at this Thunder team, number one, they're not going to have as much injury luck as they had this year. That's like impossible, like to have. Like for us, I know that like part of it is how great they are at working on their bodies, how great they are at recovery, all that stuff. Another part of it is luck, as they've been upfront about. Like Mark's been upfront about, the players have been upfront about. It's luck, and so like you just cannot bank on J will only miss 7 games, and Shea will miss only a handful of games, only 3 or 4 games. Like you cannot bank on that. Like you have to be prepared and continue to improve your roster, number one. Number two, I think that this Thunder team can still go out there and find a way to maximize, like you saw in the playoffs. They need more scoring help. They need more guys who can take some pressure off of Shea and J-Dub. And most importantly, number three, both of our local audiences, right? You're in Dallas for the moment before you make a huge transition. In Oklahoma City, like both of we cannot spend all season going, oh my gosh, it's so rare for these rookie big men to have a huge impact. And like, look at what Chet's doing in the playoffs. That's such an anomaly. Look at what Derek Lively's doing in the playoffs. It's such an anomaly. And then be like, well, the only way the Thunder can improve their front court rotation is through the draft. Like, no, they're going to have free agency. They're going to have the trade market. Like, this is not the only chance that the Thunder get at helping their front court. And you can make a strong argument that, like, outside of a few guys that we mentioned on the show, the way you maximize your ability to help yourself in the front court is not through the draft.
Yeah. I mean, you can get somebody, like, here's the way I see it is you can get the same help you're looking for. Like, yeah, Zach Edey's a lot cheaper than whatever center you want to throw out there. But like in the free agent market, centers take it, or really just in the NBA, the centers take longer to develop. And honestly, just players take longer to develop. And if you're a team in that winning position, I don't know, like you can probably get somebody in free agency that's willing to even take a pay cut to go to Oklahoma City. I think it is that desirable of a team that I do think you might start be entering that territory. I don't think it really happened 10 years ago in the KD era, but I do think this team just has such a different aura. I think Shea is much more like, he's a different kind of likable. It's the same way like how players want to play with Kyrie. He may not be the best player in the league, but he might be one of the most likable, and I think Shea's entering that territory. So you can get free agents that you're trying to build through the draft to get.
Yeah, Shea's entering that territory as one of the best players in the league. And, not just that, but the city of Oklahoma City is much different than it was back in the KD era. Like you're not going to be able to compete with like what Dallas and LA and these places in New York can offer you, but it's also no longer this docile, like, why would a millionaire ever want to step foot in Oklahoma City? Like there are some pros to it whenever you're only having to spend, a certain amount of time in Oklahoma City, and you're still traveling in that time. And it is also what's best for your career in the sense of a winning environment is automatically going to elevate these role players elevate them up to their next contract and their next destination. So it is very interesting to see what could happen there. But Richard, thank you so much for joining us, for talking draft, for kicking off, this portion of the off season. I hope to have you back as much as possible. We try to do it weekly, but I know that you're very busy with a lot of stuff that's going on. So we'll see how often we can get this done, but hopefully weekly. Richard, what is on the docket for you? What would you like everyone to go check out?
Yeah, I do like NBA level scouting reports. All those are starting to come in every single day. So check those out at my Substack, mavsdraft.substack.com. And then also Locked On NBA Big Board.
Locked On NBA Big Board, Mavs Draft Substack. Make sure you subscribe to both those things. And until next time, thank you so much, Richard. Be good and be good to one another.